Well, I am thrilled and delighted now to be joined by John Duncan, who's head of content for Leafly. And Leafly, I suppose, could be generically described as, I suppose, the world's leading content for cannabis.
Yeah.
John,
it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much indeed.
Yeah.
Not that many people have had, I suppose, the pleasure, the delight, or whatever you want to call it, the opportunity to work. Yes, the high. Let's get all the puns over and done with to start with. Of working in the cannabis market, at least not legally. What did you do beforehand?
Yep. So I was at Vice Media for about 4 years, based out of our Brooklyn office, and was publisher of our health and wellness channel, Tonic. And that was actually how I got into and aware of the cannabis space more from a business standpoint, was just seeing, particularly from a wellness side, cannabis and the role that cannabis was starting to play within that.
Well, I mean, joking aside, it is a very interesting space. It's a new space. By all accounts, there are many more states, markets, maybe countries who will be legalizing recreational cannabis in one form or another over the course of the next sort of 5 years. So you really are a pioneer in an industry that will, I'm sure, be very large. So let's start at the very beginning.
Sure.
What's the business model currently of Leafly, and who are your users?
So Leafly helps our consumers find cannabis. And with that, we work with licensed producers as well as licensed retailers across Canada and the United States, all legal. There are a few folks out there that still work with kind of the illegal players in the market, but we very much pride ourselves on kind of staying above the board because, to your point, this is becoming such a huge space and opportunity that we want to be those pioneers, and we see that obviously the best way to do that through working legally through the system, of course. And from a business model standpoint today, it's advertising mainly. So again, we work with a lot of licensed producers to run advertising across our platform, where we reach between 10 and 15 million people a month in North America. But we also have launched recently our Germany office because it's medically legal there as well. So we're very much looking to kind of expand globally to sort of get the word out about cannabis and again, sort of help our users find, whether that be learn or actually locate.
Now, I presume that the market is still unbelievably fragmented. Lots of opportunity for consolidation slightly later on, and the equivalent of sort of the mama and papa sort of retail stores of the old days. Is that typically how the market works at the moment?
Yeah, so it's been interesting with Canada coming on. So on October 17th of last year, Canada became the first G7 country to legalize adult use for cannabis. Uruguay was the first country to do it, but Canada obviously being sort of a major Western economy. And what I see there is, because of that federal legalization, it essentially dropped the provincial borders and allowed for growth across the country. In the US, what's interesting is you have it legal in 30 states, both recreationally and medically, but because it's state by state, you only can operate within each state, and so it's a much smaller sort of mom and pop. So in Canada, from a retail side as well as from a licensed producer side, you have massive major corporations that are overnight billion-dollar companies, at least on paper, because of that federal legalization.
And am I right that you're not, in a sense, technically allowed to brand cannabis as a producer? Or?
So there are some very strict regulations in Canada on what you can and cannot do. It's actually previous with my health and pharma experience. It's not too dissimilar to how pharma is regulated, particularly in Europe and in Canada, in terms of that direct-to-consumer advertising of the product itself versus the brand, or sort of in that unbranded standpoint. So yes, the packaging is very plain and boring, to say the least.
Now, what's the business model? Are you, I mean, clearly you're generating a lot of interest in the site, a lot of users, a lot of hits. What's the economic model in terms of the supply chain and where you're getting your money from?
Sure. So again, we are getting millions of people coming to us to learn about the space. And I think with legalization in Canada, as well as with continued legalization in the States, and recent passing of the Farm Bill, which legalized hemp, which will allow for CBD to be shipped across the country, you just have a lot more people interested in it, and we are there creating that content to help users educate themselves and make better informed decisions. whether that's for themselves, for their parents, whether it's for medical use, whether it's for adult use, whether it's for a Friday night or for a yoga session or anything like that. So where we want to go is, again, helping the consumer find it, but doing that by also creating a better experience with retailers such that they are properly set up, because some of them, particularly in the States, are sort of that smaller mom and pop. So they don't have sort of the investment or the infrastructure in place, and we're able to come in and help them to get set up, to create better awareness to our audience and to reach them and to drive people into their store.
And how are you creating the content?
So we've got a team of freelancers across Canada as well as across the United States. We create editorial content. This year, actually, in Canada, we'll be launching Leafly TV. I think a big thing for us, and for me personally, is to create content that helps normalize and destigmatize cannabis. I've learned a lot in these past 8 months that I've been now with Leafly. And I think there's just a lot of misperceptions out there in terms of what it is and what it isn't, and what people knew it to be back in the 60s and 70s, and what it is today and how people use it.
We're seeing a phenomenal growth of clearly user-generated content. What's your balance between content that you create yourself, content that maybe is user-generated, and the legalities of all those sorts of issues?
That's a great question. So Leafly very much prides itself on the quality of our original content. So we do majority of the content creation ourselves. However, we started originally as just a database of cannabis strains, not too dissimilar to wine, different varietals of wines, where people could come on and leave reviews. And so as such, we've created this incredible community where I believe there's over 1 million user-generated reviews on our site that speak to what they think of strains or specific products or retail stores. So actually there's a nice balance where we can create the original content such that it is properly educated and informed, so we're not misleading, but still allow for the consumer to come on and say what they think of a product or anything like that. And I think what we are seeing is that people are actively engaged within the cannabis community. I think they're excited about it, whether because they've been within it for so long and it's finally coming to sort of the foreground, or they're new to it and want to share their experience because it's the first time they've done something, and they can sleep better, they don't have as much pain in their knees or something like that, or they just find it a nice changeover from something else that maybe they were doing.
Now, not that many people have had the opportunity to work in a completely new sort of market, especially the cannabis market. What's your experience been?
It's been amazing. I mean, I think, and maybe being an American, maybe it speaks to sort of the kindness of Canadians that people are familiar with, but it is very much sort of everyone is all in this together and we want to all succeed, even though, of course, there are competitors in this space, but because it's still nascent, it's sort of a rising tide lifts all boats. And it's just kind of learning and going and experimenting and testing things, whether from a content standpoint or from a product standpoint or from a retail standpoint. But everyone kind of with the same goal, again, of normalizing something that really a lot of people are using, but maybe are a little wary of sort of publicly speaking about.
Now, were your parents more pleased that you worked for Vice or for Leafly?
When I first spoke to them about interviewing for Leafly, I sort of mumbled what I was doing in hopes that they wouldn't hear and move on. But I joke that this is the first time working for a company where I can actually point my parents to Facebook, and it's a little more suitable for work than maybe some of my previous work advice.
Well, John, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We'll look at the growth of Leafly over the course of the next few months with great interest.
Yeah.
Thanks indeed.
Yeah, thanks for having me.